afternoon. Today I'm going to talk about an interesting topic that is evaluating and adapting ELT materials. But first of all, we have to define what are materials. Materials are anything which is deliberately used to increase the learner's knowledge and experience of the language, according to Brian Tomlinson. Its classification could be in Kurzweil supplementary multimedia and types like written, audio, visual, self-made, adapted, or adapted. Mhm. Um, but according to the reading, the context of evaluation. Materials evaluation is a procedure that involves measuring the value or potential value of a set of learning materials. The evaluation process is never static, so when materials are deemed appropriate for a particular course, after a preliminary evaluation of it, their ultimate success or failure may only be determined after a certain amount of classroom use. And we have also the external evaluation. This criterion will provide a comprehensive external overview of how the materials have been organized by the teacher, obviously. And the aim is examining the organization of the materials and stated explicitly by the author or publisher by looking at the blurb, as we said, or the claims made on the cover of the teacher's or student's book and the introduction and table of contents. And what about the internal evaluation? The essential issue at this stage is to analyze the extent to which the aforementioned factors in the external evaluation stage match up with the internal consistency and organization of the materials. Those factors could be like the presentation of the skills in the materials, the grading and sequencing of the materials too. Where reading this course, skills are involved. There's very much in the way of an appropriate text beyond the sentence, as we said, and also the criterion. Material should take learning styles into account because material should be catered for styles of learning according to these: the visual, the auditory, the kinesthetic, studial, experiential, analytic, global, dependent, and independent. But what about the overall evaluation? For this exist parameters: the usability factor, the generalizability factor, and the adaptability factor, and also the flexibility factor. Because this materials evaluation is one part of a complex process, and that materials, once selected, can only be judged successful after classroom implementation and feedback. That's the reason why we have adapting materials. The general aim is to look at some of the factors to be considered in the process of adapting teaching materials within particular classroom environments where there is a perceived need for change and manipulation of certain design features. Um, According to a context, the context of adaptation is a process subsequent to and dependent on adoption because it's essentially a process of matching. Its purposes is to maximize the appropriacy for teaching materials in context by changing some of the internal characteristics of a course book to suit our particular circumstances better. And why we have to adapt? The reasons for adapting are, well, they depend, of course, on the whole range of variables operating in your, well, in our own teaching situation and on teachers' priorities may will differ with considerably from those of another. For example, not enough grammar coverage in general, reading passages contain too much unknown vocabulary. And for this, we have, when we are adapting materials, we have some principles and procedures like adding, including, expanding, and extending. Materials are supplemented by putting more into them while taking into account the practical effect on time allocation, deleting, including, subtracting, and uprooting is clearly the opposite process that for addition and has such needs no further only if you clarify those terms, no? Also modifying, including and rewriting and restructuring. It's a very general term in the language applying to any kind of change. Mm, Simplifying, strictly speaking, the technique of simplification is one type of modification, namely a rewriting activity, reordering this procedure. The final one that is in the reading discussed in this section refers to the possibility of putting the parts of a course book in a different order, in the order that we may need or our students need. Also, the framework for adaptation. The intention here has been to offer a workable framework into which the main possibilities for adaptation can be fitted. So, finally, we found that evaluating and adapting ELT materials is very important according to what our students are needing at that moment, and also uh, the curriculum and many things. For example, we can say that evaluating ELT materials is the context of evaluation, the external evaluation, the internal evaluation, and the overall evaluation. And when adapting materials, the context of adaptation, the reasons for adapting, and the principles and procedures. So this is all. Good afternoon.